All right, everybody, welcome back. So today what we're going to be working on is step number 6, which is drawing your name in perspective. We are just going to start off with a generic name, but you will be doing your own name. So here are some examples of different names. As you can see, they are all drawn in perspective. So we're just gonna do a generic name today, and I try to pick letters that a lot of people have in their name. So let's go ahead and begin. In the top right hand corner, you're gonna write your first name, your last name, whatever your period number is, and then this is notes number 6. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we are going to go ahead and draw a horizon line going through the middle of your paper. You probably want to leave a little bit more room than you normally would up top. So if you want to move your triangle down a little bit, you can, especially if you're a beginner. And make sure your triangle's lined up the edge of your paper and draw your horizon line, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and put in my vanishing point right in the middle. It's just a lot easier that way. And to do your name, we're going to sketch it out first, and then we are going to be drawing around your name. So in this case, we're just going to do a generic name for Rosie. So just really lightly, just kind of sketch those letters out. Just like this. We kind of call this the skeleton. So Rosie right there. Now going back to the irregular shapes, this is pretty much what we're going to be doing. So we're going to take the triangle and we're just going to go all the way around your shape just using different angles. And you can get really fun and funky with it. And these little skeletons are just a guide for your drawing. So if you are a beginner, I would probably try to follow me and the angles of how I do things as much as you can. If this is really easy to you, then you can kind of do your own thing. So I'm just taking my triangle and I'm going around my letter, and I'm using that skeleton as a guide. Just like that. So I'm just taking my triangle. It's just like irregular shapes, and they don't have to exactly look like the letters. They can be a little funky, almost graffiti-like. If you have any excess lines, you can go ahead and erase those. And then you also might have holes in your letter. So we can easily put holes in your letter by just taking your triangle, and you can make any kind of hole you want. A triangle hole, an octagon hole, whatever you want. But in this case, I'm just gonna do kind of like a triangle because it looks more like the R. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to erase my skeleton, just like that. And there's a couple different ways of going about and doing your letters. So I personally like doing one letter at a time, but if it's easier for you, you can do the same thing with all of your letters and then take it to the vanishing point. But I'm gonna just do one letter at a time, and the reason being is sometimes our letters have to shift over a little bit, so I like to just do one letter at a time. So just like irregular shapes, you wanna take every single point to the vanishing point. So I'm gonna take this point to the vanishing point. I'm gonna take this point to the vanishing point, and sometimes they're super thin, and that's okay. Just like that. I'm gonna take this inside point to the vanishing point. I'm going to take this point to the vanishing point. And I specifically chose this name because a lot of you have these same exact letters in your name. So I tried to get all the hard ones. And definitely take your time, draw nice and light. And I'm just going all the way around my irregular shape and taking every point to the vanishing point. As far as the insides go, we also need to take those points to the vanishing point, but you don't want to draw through your letter, you just want to draw inside that little hole, just like that. So let's cut off your hole first. So I'm gonna not make mine super thick. I'm gonna make my cuts about this wide here. So what I did is I lined up my triangle with the edge of my paper, or lined up my triangle with the edge of my shape, moved it down in a parallel fashion, just like in the irregular shapes, and cut it off. And I'm gonna do that on the inside for this side here. So line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel fashion, and cut it right there. And then I really gotta get in there and try to erase that the best I can. Just like that. Now I'm gonna go around my shape and start to cut that. So I'm gonna line it up with the edge of my shape and try to make it kind of the same thickness I had. Just like that. Line it up with the edge of my shape here. Move it over in a parallel fashion. Cut it off. And again, if you are really struggling with this kind of stuff, do yours exactly like mine. Line it up. Move it in a parallel fashion. Just like that. And if you make a mistake, you can always erase it. Like that one was a little bit too far inward. I'm just gonna restart that. So line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel fashion, because you want those two lines to match up a little bit better. Oh, that's so much better. And now I'm gonna do the inside. So if it's really hard for you to figure out what side's what, start with the easiest side. So I know that this side here, I'm gonna line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel fashion and try to cut it about the same thickness. This here is thinner than my cut, so I'm just gonna leave that alone. But I do need to cut this, and it's super teeny tiny and thin. All I have to do is the same exact steps. So line it up with the edge of my shape, move it down, and it's gonna be a super thin cut, just like that. And what we're gonna do is gently and very carefully erase your excess. So sometimes when you are doing your letters, they are gonna look a little bit like this, and that's just because they're getting close to that horizon line, and also because they're really close to lining up with that vanishing point. So that's why it's gonna kind of look a little funky, but you're doing everything right. So I'm just taking my time to erase all of my excess lines. Just like that. And then now I'm gonna go ahead and do the skeleton for my O. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take my triangle and just go around my letter O. And again, this does not have to be perfect. They can be funky, it's all right. But the skeleton that I drew, this O that I drew, that's just only a guide to keep us focused. And they can be kind of graffiti-like, and that's okay. All right. So I need to do the inside of my O now. Now, I'm not gonna do a triangle this time. I'm gonna do more of a polygonal shape. So I'm just gonna take my triangle here and make a more funky, more complex shape. I can go ahead and erase my skeleton. That's why it's super important to draw light. That was just a guideline. I'm drawing just a little bit harder just so you can see what I'm drawing. Now I'm going to take every single point to the vanishing point. So this one here I'm not going to see. And I'm just going to line this up to the vanishing point and draw it in. Just like that. And I'm just going to take every single point to the vanishing point now. So take your time lining every single point to the vanishing point. This one here doesn't go to the vanishing point because I'm not going to see it, but now I'm going to try the insides to see if any of those points go to the vanishing point. Looks like this one does. That one does not. That one does not. That one does not. Okay, so that turned out to be pretty easy. So it looks like I only have a couple sides to cut off. So we're going to line it up with the edge of our shape, move it in a parallel fashion, and I want to keep my eye on how deep those are and cut those the same way. Line that up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, and go ahead and cut that side. And now I want to do my inside. So I know this side's going to be really easy, so I'm going to start off with that one first. Line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel fashion, go ahead and cut that, and do this side as well. So line it up, move it in a parallel fashion, cut it, and then go ahead and erase your excess lines. All right, now we're gonna move on to our S. S's, they aren't hard. You just have to take your triangle and go around the sketched out shape that you've done. S's are gonna have a lot of angles in them, but they're not difficult. And again, this doesn't have to be a perfect S. It can be more of like a graffiti S. If you find this difficult, you can always follow my shape. If you find this easy, you can always make your own shape. Sometimes I like to get a little fancy with my shapes and put more strong angles on them just to make them look more fun. So I'm just taking my triangle right now and I'm just going around my shape. Creating some interesting angles and just kind of, to the best of my ability, making it look like an S and just following those lines. If you have any excess, you can go ahead and erase that. And then you can go ahead and erase your skeleton on the inside. You don't need that anymore. And hopefully you drew that nice and light so that it's easy to erase. All right, so now what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take every single point to the vanishing point. So I'm gonna take this point to the vanishing point. I'm gonna take this point here to the vanishing point. I'm going to take this point here to the vanishing point. And then I'm just going to kind of go all the way around and check all of my points. I'm going to take this point here and it's going to go to the vanishing point, but I'm just going to draw right until right here, so I'm not drawing inside my shape. Because this one is directly above the vanishing point, it's going to look a little thin and funky. All right, so let's try these other points here. This point here, it's gonna go to the vanishing point, but I'm just gonna draw that little section in. This point here, that one gets to go to the vanishing point as well, but I'm gonna stop it before it goes in that shape. And that's it. So I'm gonna start cutting around my easy areas. So I'm gonna start on the outside here, line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, cut it so that it kind of matches your other letters you've done. And then I'm gonna go to this side, line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel fashion, and cut it. If it doesn't meet up, it's okay. Just erase it and try again. So line it up with the edge of your shape, move it in a parallel fashion. That's better. Just like that. We can go ahead and erase these lines, excess lines at the bottom if they bother you. You can go ahead and do that now. All right, and then now we're gonna do this side here. So we're gonna line it up with the edge of our shape, move it in a parallel fashion, cut it off. And then even though there's a little tiny baby sliver here, we're still gonna try to cut off our shape. So we're gonna line it up with the edge of our shape and move in a parallel way to where it meets that cut, just like that, super teeny tiny. And I'm gonna erase this little bit right there. And I'm gonna erase this excess right here. And now we're gonna start off with the harder sides here. So I know that this shape here, I'm gonna line it up to this edge of the shape, move it in a parallel fashion and cut it. And then I know I have to cut this side because it's kind of open. And to do that, I'm doing it the same way. Line it up with the edge of your shape, move it in a parallel fashion, and cut it just like that. Go ahead and erase. And we are done with our S. So that was probably the hardest one. Now it's gonna get a lot easier. We're gonna go ahead and do our I. So I'm just gonna take my triangle, and I am just going to make my I. So I'm just taking my triangle. If this is getting easier for you, you can kind of make some funky shapes and get creative. But I'm just taking my triangle and moving it around my eye. Just like that. If you have any excess, you can go ahead and erase that. You can also erase the inside skeleton of your letter. And then now you're gonna take every single point to the vanishing point. So we're gonna take this point to the vanishing point. We're gonna take this point here to the vanishing point. We're gonna take this point to the vanishing point, and if it runs into your letter, that's okay. You can just skip it and move on. So see how I didn't draw into the S, I just kind of skipped that area and moved on. I'm going to do the inside of my I now, but I'm gonna stop as soon as it hits that front side of that letter. And that's why it's super important to draw light too, because you're gonna do a lot of erasing. So I took this point to the vanishing point, but I stopped right where that letter was. And then I'm gonna take this point here, and I'm gonna go until I hit the S. I know my letter is not gonna be that thick, so I don't have to draw it all the way to the vanishing point. All right, so I'm gonna keep taking all of my points to the vanishing point. This happens to have a lot of points that need to go there. So I'm gonna take this point here to the vanishing point, but I'm gonna stop right there. And then it looks like I'm finished, so I can just start cutting off my eye. So I'm gonna start here at the bottom, line it up with the edge of my shape, move it down in a parallel fashion, and I'm gonna try to meet the same depth as all my other letters, just like that. Line it up with the edge of your shape, move it in a parallel fashion. There you go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and erase my excess lines real quick. That way I don't get confused later on. So I know these all go to that bottom part of the eye. I don't need those anymore. You can always erase at the very end. It's just a preference of mine to erase as I go. All right, so I'm gonna do this side next. Line it up with the edge of my shape, move it down in a parallel way, cut it off, erase my excess. And then I'm gonna do this side. If you're having a tough time with doing that, try starting with the easiest side. So I'm gonna line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, and make my cut, and then just go all the way around. So line it up to the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, and cut it just like that. Line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, and cut it so that it meets where I last cut. I know that can be confusing. You can go ahead and erase your excess lines, but the more you practice, the better you're gonna get at this. So I'm just erasing up my excess lines. Just like that. Okay, so the last letter that we are going to be doing is the letter E. It looks like we have plenty of space because I sketched my letters out earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my letter E. So I'm going to take my triangle. I'm going to try to avoid where I wrote my notes, so you're going to see me kind of cut into my skeleton a little bit, and that's okay. The skeleton is simply a guide, and if you mess up, just erase what you messed up on. So I'm just taking my triangle around this letter E. Like I said, it can be funky. It does not have to be exact. Just like that, and then we're gonna go ahead and erase our skeleton. Hopefully you drew light. That way it's easy to erase. And then now that we have the front of our E, we're gonna take all those points to the vanishing point. So I'm gonna take this point here to the vanishing point, this point here to the vanishing point, this point here to the vanishing point. And because I know that it's going to be about this much in depth, I'm going to stop where that letter I hits. And then now I'm going to do this side. So I'm going to check every point. So this point here is going to go to the vanishing point. This point here is going to go to the vanishing point as well. And you notice I didn't draw in my letters. If you accidentally did a little, just go ahead and erase that. Now we're going to go ahead and cut off our shape. So I'm going to start with the easiest, most obvious one by lining up my triangle with the edge of my shape, moving it down in a parallel way, and cutting it just like that. Then I'm going to do this side here, line it up with the edge of my shape, move it over, make my cut here, and I'm gonna like move my pencil and just calm down to where I'm not drawing inside that eye, just like that. And then I'm going to erase my excess. If you accidentally erase something, you can sketch back in or use a triangle to do that. And I'm going to erase my excess lines. Again, if you accidentally erase something, there we go. Now I got to cut off the inside. So it is pretty close to this thickness, but I still need to cut it. So I'm going to line it up with the edge of my shape, move it in a parallel way, cut that, erase this tiny little part right there. If you accidentally erase your letter, that's okay, just sketch it back in. And then I need to cut the side here. So line it up with the edge of my shape, move it down in a parallel way. This one's going to be an extra small cut, and erase your excess lines. So this is what your notes are going to look like. And then on the back side of it, you're just going to turn it over, write your first name, your last name, whatever your period number is, and this is going to be final number 6, and you are going to be doing your name. If your name's super long, you can spread it out in the top and bottom and I'll give you extra credit, but this is kind of what they are to look like in the end. So you have many options, but I would use your notes that we did in class to help you with your final copy. If you have any questions, let me know.